Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to check in and get an update on Pennsylvania's schools. How are they doing financially? How are they doing in a whole variety of ways? Going to be interesting. But first, every now and then you learn something you didn't know before. The state police are actually storing video machines seized, some of them legally. We'll get to that with two of the state's leading reporters following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back to the program. Well, I'll tell you, we've got a fascinating couple of topics. One of them falls into, really? This really does happen? The state police are running out of room because they have seized I guess, illegal video poker machines and others that are all over the place in the state. I guess I'm a little naive. Joining me is Mike Straub, WGAL-TV reporter and sometimes host of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Mike, thanks for coming on. And Brad Christman, he's with Radio PA. And they provide radio service, news service, I should say. Give me the number.
About 50 radio stations.
Just about 50
yeah,
radio.
That's all.
I'm going to start with you. When you told me about this, well, both of you told me, I was stunned. I mean, townships, are they paying? You got to get into this.
Well, we were discussing, well, what are we going to talk about today? And we both wanted to talk about the video gaming terminal legislation. And one of the aspects that came out of a hearing a couple weeks ago that was held by House Gaming Oversight was that the state police, obviously, there are thousands of these illegal video machines now.
That I thought I knew.
Around. But when state police go in and bust a bar, they have to seize these machines. When you seize the machines, you have to store them somewhere until the case comes through. And in the hearing, the state police did discuss, we're running out of room to store these things.
This is unbelievable.
So one more argument to maybe try to make this illegal business.
And there's something about payoffs and do you know about that?
So a little bit of background. If you're not familiar exactly what we're talking about it almost looks like old-fashioned video games, video poker machines or other video games that people can gamble on. And so they're sitting in the back corner of bars or other sorts of, those kinds of clubs that are popular in smaller Pennsylvania towns, those old kind of membership clubs, things like that. Yeah. And so these things have been sitting in the back of these bars for years and years and years. Lawmakers said as many as 40,000 of these machines are operating illegally across the state.
That is absolutely.
So how do they say?
I'm going to slow you down.
Okay.
Repeat that number.
40. They said, this is according, we're not making this number, the lawmakers have said as many as 40,000 of these machines operating illegally in Pennsylvania. So how do you do that? You don't think the cops would mind? Again, the lawmakers have said they're paying off local townships and borough managers get a cut of this stuff.
And to look the other way.
To look the other way. So that everybody, and they convince themselves, oh, they're kind of paying a local tax on this machine, and that's okay. This doesn't feel so any grimy anymore.
Were you stunned at this? Now, I'd heard about this in general terms before.
Yes.
This isn't new. But the massive scope, the fact that, I guess, the state police have lots of, I'm not saying it's not serious, but, they're pushed or pressed. They have big jobs to do.
Right.
And
it's not a life or death issue.
Right. And if they don't get a call from somebody to report it, they're not going into taverns and bars, are they? Looking for these things and clubs?
Well, I think maybe they are. You'd have to ask the state police that. But when we talk about things that you didn't know before, another part of that hearing that was discussed, one lawmaker said it's typical practice for, let's say, the bartender is in charge of the cash in any particular establishment, that if someone comes in that they don't know, that's not a regular customer, they play that machine and they win, they won't get paid because the bartender would think, well, you're an undercover agent or you're with the state police. And so not only are the illegal machines operating, but people are, being taken for their winnings.
I guess I'm naive, but I do have a question that relates to where does all this go? As you know, there's an effort because the state's typically in need of revenue to balance the budget. Yeah. And there are several, I think, proposals in the legislature to expand gaming to make some of that legal.
That's what's so crazy. We've talked about how widespread this is and just sort of the wow factor of all this. So how does the state react? let's just regulate it. Let's tax it. Why, as long as they're making less money, they're not worried about the drain on the moral ethics of the society. They're saying, well, they're doing it anyway. We should be the ones collecting this money, and let's use it to try to create some revenue in a cash-strapped state.
Yeah.
There's legislation making its way through right now that would allow up to 5 machines in an establishment that has a liquor license. There's some give back to the casinos because the casinos are concerned. Cannibalization is the word that keeps getting thrown out, that there's only so many gambling dollars to go around, and these machines would cannibalize money from the casinos. So the casinos would get a 5% reduction in their state tax obligation, which is extremely high, because the casinos were invented to bring money to the state.
12 of them, and
11 of the 12 are against the legalization of VGTs.
That doesn't surprise me, because they think they're not going to come and gamble. Folks aren't going to come.
The only one that's for it is Penn National Gaming. And in Illinois, which is the closest model to Pennsylvania for this whole thing of going from casinos to VGTs, Penn National was in the casino business in Illinois. They went to VGTs. Penn National invested in VGT routing businesses. They want to do the same thing here. So they're the one that's
we possibly have 2 subjects we're going to get into. We can talk about, we have a new entry in the Republican primary for governor. A pretty well-off guy from Pittsburgh has now Allegheny County has now indicated he's going to run. And what's going on with the Democratic convention that was held in Philadelphia, we'll decide, and we'll get back to you in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. I'm chatting with Mike Straub of WGAL-TV and Brad Christman with Radio PA. All right, let me start with you, Mike. It looks like every day now we have some consideration that Governor Wolf might have another opponent on the Republican side. We'll see if something happens on the Democratic side. We'll get to that element later. So we have this wealthy business consultant from Allegheny County named Paul Mango, and then we have the Speaker of the House. Can this thing get any bigger?
Yeah, there's a few people, always just kind of dipping their toes in the water to see what's there. We also heard Dave Reed, the majority leader, pull his name out of the race. But yeah, Paul Mango, a wealthy businessman from Allegheny County, is officially in the race. He's crisscrossing the state right now, in fact, and has dates. He'll be in central part of the state probably for the first time people will hear that name. And so it's him and Scott Wagner who have officially said they're going to jump in. And then a letter was sort of leaked out there. No, that's the right word. That's a buzzword right now. A letter somehow became public of House, the Speaker of the House, Mike Terzai, sort of exploring the idea of looking for fundraising from the state Republican Party. So you have to expect he'll take another shot at something else here.
Well, I think what's fascinating, and there's been all this speculation about Mango's wealth that he could throw. Remember a guy named Tom Wolfe? Who put $10 million and completely changed the nature. It was over after the first 2 weeks. It was. I mean, you can't rule something like that out again. We're talking about the Republican nomination. Go ahead.
Right, and I think Scott Wagner is going to do the exact same thing. Yeah. I mean, we're still a year out from the point where he's really going to be spending a lot of money.
He's a York County senator. He's been all over the state. He has been described as
Pennsylvania's Donald Trump.
I don't know if
that's fair or not.
I don't know. And he had this little controversy over the York Country Club, right? Where
he was caught on video confronting what's called a tracker. Someone who was filming him.
By the way, I think we've mentioned this before. A tracker is someone that usually other campaigns hire, and they put this video up and they run it throughout an event and after the event and before and after the event for the purpose of finding not just your positions, but should you make a the M-word mistake, right?
Yeah. They're trying to catch you in an error, then put that into an ad or a viral video clip just for that.
And what Scott Wagner did, unfortunately for Scott Wagner, was give that tracker exactly what he was there to get.
Yeah. One of the things that, now as we tape this program, the Auditor General is holding a press conference, but the situation involving the National Democratic Convention last summer in Philadelphia has become something of a controversy. What's the story there?
When you host a big event, it costs a lot of money. So when the Democratic National Convention was planned in Philadelphia, they obviously were fundraising hard to hold the event. And one of the people they turned to is the state of Pennsylvania, the same way that the Republican Party turned to the state of Pennsylvania when the convention was in Philadelphia. And they got $10 million in state funds. It was in last year's budget to help host and pay for that event.
An economic development grant is basically what this was, because the convention brings in money.
The bigger point is they ended up with a $4 million surplus, and they gave the employees a bonus.
They gave Democratic staffers apparently received bonuses, and I spoke with Senator Joe Scarnati the day he sent a letter,
$1 million worth of the four, correct?
Asking for an audit. And Senator Scarnati says they also treated it like lawmakers used to treat WAMs, walking around money, where they handed out. He named the Philadelphia School District as one such recipient, which he said they may be a worthy recipient, but it's the legislature's job to decide where that money goes.
Here's what's surprising to me, Mike. The governor's a Democrat. He goes after the Democratic National Convention. The Philadelphia Democratic leaders, the convention was headed by one Edward G. Rendell, and he wants an audit. He goes to the Democratic Auditor General, and Republican leaders are also asking for an audit. And as we tape this, we'll have to find, see what the Auditor General says. Does that surprise you? That he's got an election next year, or is he trying to be the independent, the maverick? Take it.
Interestingly, I agree with you completely that he's trying to establish himself as an independent voice and also just kind of fighting for what's right. He very publicly pointed out to us as a group of reporters, hey, I raised my own money for my inauguration, and we had a surplus, and I gave it to charity. I didn't just keep it in my pocket. Now, I think a part of this that people aren't talking about, because we should say the governor has said they should have returned money back to the state of Pennsylvania. He's come out and publicly said that. Part of this, though, when Rendell has been asked about this, he says straight out, no, that's how you do this. I told people they'd get bonuses at the end of this. If you work for free, if we have money left over, you'll get a bonus. So the point is, was that out there when the state gave this money too? Was that known all along, and the state just didn't quite get that message?
Did the governor know?
Well, that's what I mean. Because Rendell has said all along, no, exactly what I said would happen.
And just by the way, the Republican leaders want this audit in 30 days. They want it resolved before the budget deadline comes up June 30th.
It's sort of like the new special prosecutor. We're going to get the report on Trump, the Russians and Trump in 30 days. Hey, thanks for coming in. Great update. All right, coming up, we're going to check on the conditions of Pennsylvania schools. There was a study done, Pennsylvania School Boards Association, and some interesting results. We'll get to that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Well, welcome back to the show. Nathan Maines, he's the executive director of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, joins me. We got some great topics to take up here. One is we just decided seconds before we got on air to talk about school boards. Some places you have these big hot races where the voters are weighing who to vote for in the various primaries. And then you have places where there's no one who's filed.
We just saw that in the primary.
Yes.
You've got some districts that had very competitive primaries, and they'll have competitive general elections coming up in November, and others where they really have to work to recruit people to take on those seats. So it's an interesting dynamic.
I've been in education my whole life. I say serving on a local school board is one of the toughest jobs in the country. It's unpaid. You got to put in countless hours. It's not going to a bi-weekly meeting, is it? Or
it's not. It's not. And I'm a little biased.
Well, I am too.
But you're talking about people that don't realize it. You sign on. They're meeting on average at least twice a month at night after they've gone and held down a day job someplace. Numerous committees. They serve on other organizations by nature of the school board, and these are unpaid folks that are making $1 million, tens of millions of dollars in decisions, really representing the local citizens. It's a tough job.
Oh, amen to that. All right, you conducted a survey of the chief administrators of the various schools of all kinds, school districts, IUs, others, and you came away with some interesting results. The funding always gets in the news, but this reiterates the difficult financial situation that Pennsylvania schools are in. What were some of the big findings?
Well, we talked to school districts. We did a community survey. We also looked at a lot of data sets from Department of Ed and other groups, along with our partner organizations. And what we found in this study was really that districts continue to do a tremendous amount with very little. We look at districts in Pennsylvania are overall among the lowest funded a share of state revenue going into school districts. We're about 46th in the nation in terms of the state meeting their share. Yet when you look at the performance, we're ranked in the top 10 across just about every measure. So it's really a testament to, I think, the great work that school teachers, administrators, school boards do every single day. But we also talk to them about the challenges that they see on the horizon, and it's a little scary. We're talking about delayed maintenance and really putting off some important infrastructure work. We're talking about having to make hard choices about cutting programs, increasing class sizes. There's only so much left that districts can do with very little. And this, yet again kind of illustrates the point. The state's got to meet their fair share. They're funding about 36% of the average school district budget. So let me stop you.
So that means the bulk of the rest of it comes from the local taxpayers in the form of the tax they hate the most.
Sure, absolutely.
The property tax.
You're talking 70% or more. You get out into some of the suburban districts, and it's a lot more than 70% are coming from local taxpayers. Again, that's part of the problem here. It also looks at Terry, some of the costs. Pensions, I know you guys have talked about it previously, and it continues to be a hot topic. Pension costs are escalating through a lot of different reasons, including a down market and some maybe bad choices that were made many years ago to not make payments from the state side of things. But that's eating up about 32 to 33 cents of every dollar a school district spends today.
Right. Well, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the various situations that school districts are in, rural, suburban, urban. It's more complicated, I think, than most people would think. And I think you would agree the one thing we don't want to do is put video poker machines in the schools.
We should avoid that.
Actually, we're talking about a very serious subject, and we'll be back and we'll continue with this.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives.
Welcome back. We're talking about the situation that our 500 school districts, intermediate units, and other aspects of education provide. Well, Nathan Maines, let's talk a little bit about the funding. Governor recommended $100 million in new money for special education and other school activities. What's your assessment of whether that's an appropriate amount given the budget situation the state faces?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. You know, $100 million is helpful. Would school districts like to see more? Absolutely. I think, you know, you can combine what's being proposed in terms of $100 million increase with maybe some cuts in other places around mandates and things like that. It's not just about more dollars going into the system, although that's important. It's about looking at what those cost drivers are. We talked about before the last break, you know, pension costs continue to go up, healthcare costs go up. You're looking at, in the same proposal, potentially a $50 million cut in transportation funding. So when you put all that together in one lump sum, it's actually not a $100 million increase. It's in some cases, some districts, even with the increase, will have fewer dollars this year than they would have had the year before. So we've got to look at it in broader terms, in terms of what do districts need to be able to meet the demands of today's students.
And we didn't get to it on the previous segment, but it looks like, you know, the lawmakers aren't even sitting down chatting with one another, you know, across the aisle in this 6 weeks to go until the budget deadline. You know, it's fascinating that you also provide some interesting differences between suburban, rural, and urban schools. We tend to think of it in a homogenized way, but it's not, is it?
Well, it's, you know, everything about Pennsylvania can be broken down into different parts of the state, right?
Got it.
And, you know, sure, you look at the suburban schools, and I think some of the problems that they face and challenges, certainly poverty plays into it, and we do a deep dive on performance data as you look at the poverty gap in urban schools. Flip it around, and when you get out into the rural schools, people have got to have conversations around transportation.
Yeah, they're driving.
We've got some extensive districts, hundreds of square miles, and you've got to think about, you know, what those costs are and what those students are facing as they're transported each and every day. So a unique set of challenges. And of course, we touched upon earlier, the suburban districts are getting the vast majority of their funding locally, and so what is that doing to the tax base? So really unique challenges.
Yeah, and you know, I guess on balance, the suburbanites are a little better off in terms of their economic situations, but that doesn't negate the fact that when you start, here's the big debate. We're probably going to run out of time, but the property tax heavily funds the schools. On the other hand, it's the most hated tax. Yet when you think about replacing it with sales or income or other forms of taxes, every time the economy goes south, the income drops from them. It's more stable with property tax, creating a dilemma. Well, or am I wrong about that?
I think the other thing, and it comes out in the survey as well, is you survey the vast majority of community members, and they highly approve of the quality education that's being provided in that district. They love their local school district. They think they're doing a great job, and they want to support it. So I think when you drill down locally, people want to have great schools in their communities. It's when you get to the broader conversations. And I think
how to pay for them.
Absolutely, and you're going to be hard pressed to find people that don't feel that they came out of public school with a tremendous education, and when you look at what people are paying overall in property taxes, they're really not paying that much compared to what it costs to educate a child in Pennsylvania.
And one of the things would help if we had a statewide assessment system so that the assessments weren't viewed as unequal in some places compared to others. And we're behind the times on that. So overall, you fall into the category, I guess, of the taxes. The property tax is stable and therefore, you know, provides, right?
Well, I think we've taken a position that it would be very challenging to see property taxes go away. Some of the other proposals that are out there right now surprisingly talk about getting rid of property taxes, but the devil's in the details,
never happen.
And they actually don't go away.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
After the budget, come back and give us an update.
You got it.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.